And welcome to the October 5th meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Our first item at each meeting is the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd ask the audience to join us in doing that.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item is attendance. Janice, could I ask you to do that?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Jones?
Present.
Mrs. Madrick? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Mrs. Postlewaite? Present. Mr. Pickell?
Present.
Mr. Lake?
Present.
Mr. Monday?
Present.
I'd
And
like to
Janice,
take the opportunity to also introduce our new Director of Community and Economic Development, Mike Dale.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you on board, Mike.
Thank you.
welcome, Mike. The next item is the approval of the September 7th minutes of the BZA meeting. Those are included in your packet. Are there any comments on those minutes? Any corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. They're approved. Thank you. I also would point out to the board that there has been a request from one of the representatives who will be presenting this evening. Mike Andreoli has two docket items, and he is also booked to be before the county board. So he has asked if his two docket items could be moved to the end of the meeting rather than where they're currently positioned. So if no one has an objection to that, if you do have an objection, would you please say so now? Hearing no objection, we will move Mr. Andreoli's items. And those two items are docket number 2022-48-DSV and docket number 2022-50-DSV to the end of our agenda. I'll ask now, are there any petitioners or petitioner representatives here who will be asking for a continuance this evening? Seeing none, we will get started. We also have, I've seen that notice has been made in many cases using first-class mail. That has continued on through the pandemic, and we would need to exempt our rules for allowing that to be the means of notice to those who need to be noticed. So I ask for a motion on that.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. I'll also ask the IT at the back of the room if we have any online observers or any petitioners. Could you say that a little louder? Okay. All right, Zelonis. All right. Is that the only one that's online right now? Okay, all right. If during the course of the meeting, if an observer wishes to remonstrate or give input, just wave frantically, please. Thank you. First item on our agenda this evening is docket number 2022-45-DSV. That is and also 2022. I'm sorry, that's the only docket number that we have for that. 295 North 4th Street, J. Barston and that is a petition that was continued from the September meeting. It is a petition for a development standard variance to provide for a single-family dwelling and pool which exceeds the allowable lot coverage in the urban village residential zoning district. And Mr. Burris, are you going to be representing that petition?
I am.
All right. If you would start right in, we would appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you. My name is Roger Burris, attorney with offices at 410 West Oak Street in Zionsville. I'm here representing Jackie Barson, the owner of the property at 295 North 4th Street. And the first thing I'd point out about that parcel is that it's a little smaller lot than the typical lot in the village because it's a combination of two lots and half of a vacated alley. So the lot dimensions are 60 feet by 105 feet, as opposed to the typical lot of 60 by 120. And I think that's important because, you know, that's the lot that she purchased. It was not a lot that she created through her own means. I would also comment that when she purchased this property, it did have an old home on it, but the previous owner of the home had determined that home could not be salvaged due to termite damage. And so it was not my client's necessarily her choice to tear it down. It was something that she was more or less forced to do. So planning her home, my client got plans and she really prefers to have a one-story home. And by the way, she's here tonight along with her daughter. And I also have Chris Badger, who's the engineer who did our drainage plan, if there are any technical questions for him. And just this afternoon, we received a response from Mr. Susong on town staff regarding our drainage report. So some of those things we need to address. Mr. Badger tells me he's already addressed most of them, but we don't see an issue with addressing those questions from Mr. Susong. So this is one of those cases that you've had a few of where somebody in the village wants to seek a variance in order to have greater lot coverage than what's allowed under the ordinance. And I think the important thing is that my client could build a home, a bigger home, you know, without a variance. But her choice is to have a single-story home. You know, she wants a home she can live in for the future and one that she doesn't have to go up and down stairs. She also has a father who visits her and she wants to be able to accommodate her father who is even less able to go up and down stairs. So in looking at this, we thought, okay, it needs a variance. And I told her that we have to make sure that we're not going to have any negative impact on the neighbors. And the downhill neighbor here is a local police officer by the name of Doug Gauthier. So I told her we definitely can't have a negative impact on that neighbor. So I've talked to Doug several times. He has indicated that he supports our petition. He had some questions about the drainage, and I think we've satisfied his questions. I met with Mike Turley, who lives nearby, and he signed a consent to this petition. I talked to Dr. Kramer across the street, and they indicated that as long as we added some landscaping on the side of the house, that they didn't see any other issue with it. I think my clients talked to one or two other neighbors. So we wanted to make sure that all the neighbors knew what we were doing and why. And most of them have indicated, you know, that they think what we're proposing is more reasonable than some of the, you know, really large structures that you've seen built in the village. So as you well know, your decision is based on the findings of fact that need to be made in a case like this. In this case, we think that we've done a pretty good job of meeting them because the new home will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. It will not negatively impact the neighbors. We've addressed the drainage. We've addressed the scope. I know from experience and in my own petitions and in others that I've seen presented to this board that this board is very concerned when somebody wants to increase lot coverage and doesn't, make provision to accommodate the drainage on their neighbors. So we were proactive and addressed that. I know that the scope of these buildings in the village is another concern that you've had at times. So we've addressed that by building a one-story structure that we think is would fit in with the neighborhood well. So the last finding of fact that you need to find is that the strict application of the terms of the ordinance will result in an unnecessary hardship in the use of the property. And in this case, I think we also meet that because I mentioned a couple of them, that it's a unusual lot, not created by my client. It's a corner lot, so it has two front setback requirements, and we address those with town staff and some time ago, and they think we've done a good job on that. And like I explained, we could build a taller house, but that would not fit in with the adjoining properties as well as what my client proposes. So we think that this is exactly the kind of case where the Board of Zoning Appeals can exercise its discretion, its wise discretion to grant a variance and allow this project to move forward. I must acknowledge that the staff is not supportive of our petition, and I accept that. I think we have addressed the things that typically this board wants to see addressed in order to justify the variance. So in spite of the staff's not being able to fully support us, I think that they do appreciate that we've tried to do what we can to address any and all issues. And if there are any that are not addressed at this point, like the ones in the email we got from Mr. Susong today, that we will certainly address those before this would get built. So we're hoping that you will grant your approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burris. Questions for the petitioner's representative?
I have a question for you. I'm wondering, as much as the petitioner did not create this lot, and we understand that, what diligence did the petitioner do prior to buying the lot as far as understanding what the restrictions were going to be on total lot coverage?
That I do not know. I know that this lot was purchased originally by a local person by the name of Chelsea Overback, who's purchased several properties in the village, and she bought it with the idea of remodeling the house. So she was the one that did most of the work on the existing home. I think my client understood that there had been similar situations presented to this board in the past, and that this board has approved variances of the lot coverage, particularly where the petitioner addressed the issues like drainage and scope and style of the structure. So, I told her that if she addressed the issues, that I thought she would have a reasonable chance. Whether she talked to other people, we talked to the neighbors. I told her that was important. So I really think that we have done practically everything we could do in order to address any issues that anybody brought up.
But that's not exactly what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, was there an understanding that 35% lot coverage was what was in the ordinance for this piece of property and all the property that's there in the village?
My answer would be that whether she understood that or not, everybody is presumed to understand that because it's in the ordinance. So she couldn't deny that. My guess is that she talked to Chelsea about it, and Chelsea made her aware of some of the other cases in town. The old church on Walnut Street was a case with a larger variance, and we followed that closely. So she's aware of the issues, and nobody's guaranteed of getting approvals like this. We just have to do the best we can and ask that you for your questions and understanding.
Any other questions for the petitioner's representative?
I do have another question. The petitioner would be able to help herself to some extent if she would use pervious materials in the planning. And I'm reading here in the report that she has opted not to do that. Is there a reason for that?
Actually, I'm not sure that's entirely accurate, because I know she's willing to use pervious materials where she can, and that would include the area around the pool. We have had that discussion, and Mr. Badger might be able to address that better than I could.
The only place, hi, it's Chris Badger with Badger Engineering. Used to be at 990 Oak. Now we're at 9830 Suite D off of Michigan Road. So we're just in the Carmel West, so just down the street. But to talk about it, we're capturing 100% of the water that comes off, except for some of the areas where we're grading to touch down. And if you don't understand that, the house sits up a little bit in the south end and is almost flush with the north end. And let me just show you real quick. The only area that you could use some kind of
Mr. Badger, if you could use the microphone so that we can capture this for the minutes.
Sorry about that. The driveway is right here, but the majority of the driveway is actually in right of way or setback. And so also driveway is not the best place to use pervious. I know they're saying it's touted for roads and whatnot, but turning movements hurt it the most. And as you pull in and out of your driveway, you're going to be tearing that type of stuff up. In the area in the back, we used patio stones, so that's going to be pervious. But the area right around the pool, that needs to drain back into the pool because it's chlorinated water, and you don't really want that on your lawn or on your other plants. So the last piece is this little piece that comes from the front patio to the street. And that's so small, we're not going to gain any real benefit for the cost. So again, when I said we're capturing the water, you can see there's a dash line here and it brings it to a manhole. And that manhole is a pervious manhole, so it has holes in it and it has no bottom. And if you looked at it, it's going to be buried about almost 7 feet deep. And this is going to pick up all of the downspouts and bring them to here. So we're catching all of the roof water, which is huge. And then we're going to be holding it. And I ended up multiplying the factor of safety of 5 to size this. So we have quite a bit of room. And we talked, I think Michael Susong's only question was whether to keep that 10 feet away due to the ordinance again says you can't have any drainage structures within 10 feet of your property. So we're looking at moving this over so that's 10 feet. But Michael also asked for a meeting for us to have and just discuss things and look at the values that I used. But other than that, he had no real problem with the design. He's asked some technical questions, which we'll handle tomorrow. But I think in terms of the board, we're capturing almost 100% of the water and literally will not drain out. We do have an outlet pipe here, but that's only for, it's good engineering practice to have a way for it to drain if something happens. And if that were to all fill up with water, if we had something where we had lots of rain every day and this wasn't able to percolate into the ground, it would have a 4-inch outlet that would drain over the grass, over the sidewalk and into the street. So, and again, they are at a high point on Linden and 4th, and everything drains pretty much to the east.
So you said the patio in the back is pervious pavers.
Yeah, just pavers, yeah.
Okay. All right.
So that's the only place that we could use them. We used them, but it's
Okay.
still gonna drain over to that, because in terms of piezometric head, we're tilted to the east and everything's gonna come down there. So when it drains into here, it'll end up going into that. That's like a cutoff wall almost, so. But yeah, we talked to him and I think that's not a problem. We still have room to move that over to 10 feet. So I don't see it as being a technical problem or a hurdle. Plus everything that hits the pond or the pool stays in the pool. So again, that's not going to anyone else's house. It'll just raise the height of the water and the scupper will take it off and it'll go into the wastewater. So if there's any questions other than that, I think we're going to improve their drainage in terms of runoff. So nobody else has any any water onto their property from their property. So if any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner's representative? I have one, Mr. Burris, and I drove by again today. Probably in the finding of facts, the most difficult of the 3 points that we find that there is clearly an answer which makes everyone feel good about the unnecessary hardship. But there are two-story houses flanking this one across one street and one across the other. Two-story houses are very common. I can understand not wanting to climb stairs, but I find that off base. I don't think that's, so when you're saying that it's flanked by single-story houses, that's simply not true.
Right, and that was not what I said. What I said was that I thought the house that's been designed for this lot would fit in with the adjoining houses better than a two-story house. Because there are some, I mean, I think 1.5 stories is maybe more predominant in this.
There's every
immediate area.
variety, but there are two-story houses.
Right. No, I'm certainly not denying that, and I'm not criticizing those. But we have seen some two-story houses built in other areas of the village that seemed out of character and out of scope with the existing village homes. That was more my point.
I agree. Thank you. If there are no other questions, are there any remonstrators here who would like to speak for or against this project? Any online? Thank you. Could we have staff report, please?
Yes, I think Mr. Burris did a nice job summarizing the request. As he stated, they are building a new residence with a 2-car attached garage and a swimming pool, with the lot coverage would come out at about 48.9%. Drainage has been a concern by the board before, so I think staff appreciates them going forward with the drainage report. That has been submitted to DPW, I think it was last week, and they're still, from what I understand, they're still under review of that and still providing comments back to the petitioner. When looking at these type of variances, we look at surrounding uses and surrounding deviations of lot coverage. There is a adjacent property that has lot coverage at probably about 50%. However, there's not in the area any pools in the immediate area, which isn't shown as a common outdoor amenity. It's also a significantly over the allowed lot coverage at 35%. So with that said, staff is not supportive of this request and happy to answer any questions.
So you will have a new pool though, 1 block west at the church that's getting redone, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and if
Okay.
that's, I guess it's subjective to see if you think that's close enough to be counted, but yeah, I am aware of that pool, and the church location.
I just think of common outdoor amenities, if we look at the list of permits that are applied for at Plan Commission every month, 24 pools a month, I feel like it's ridiculous. So I feel like that is in Zionsville with a median household income like we have, that has become a very common outdoor amenity. Not so much in the village, more so in the village than it's been in the past. But I think just in kind of setting our expectations, I think that this community feels like that is a very typical outdoor amenity, or they wouldn't be buying pools in record numbers, I feel like.
Any other questions for staff? I think this is directed back to Mr. Burris. Have you or Mr. Badger heard back from DPW? Staff indicated there have been some discussions that is in the staff report, but I don't know. I don't think they are, and Suzanne just said that they haven't heard anything back. Have you heard anything back?
We got their response today at 4 o'clock. And Mr. Badger's already responded to.
Can you come to the mic?
Bottom line is we will respond. I mean, we don't expect
Well,
anything to go forward.
Could you share with us, because I don't think any of us have seen that, what DPW, what kind of comments they made?
Sorry for the copy state. I drink coffee all day. As you can see, they're not very, they're mostly technical. They're asking one about the plat, and I think that'll have to go back to John House, the surveyor. Another one was about the values I used, and I can go back and talk to them. And then another one was asking why I used 0.05 acre feet instead of 0.012, which was what I came up for a calculation. And that's just because I multiplied by 5 for a factor of safety. So I think all of them are very reasonable, but we can answer those tomorrow. We just haven't had a chance to respond.
And you have not seen them?
Yes, so I do have those questions that DPW had said, but there was a comment, and I think I received it after 4 at the same time, probably, that they wanted to set up a meeting to discuss. So I didn't really go through the technical comments. So I think I would like to defer to Public Works before I make any sort of comment on what they approve and not.
Can I make a suggestion? We're happy with a commitment that we have to satisfy the issues described in that letter as a condition to our approval.
I've got a quick question. Did you say your lot is currently 60 by 100?
I think it's 105.
105.
60 to 105.
Thank you.
And appreciate that comment. I mean, I'm reading through this, but I'm not sure I'm going to know a lot more when I'm finished with it. So.
Real technical, if you like. Darcy's wave bank equation is what we're using. To flow through pervious material.
I think more than anything, we'd like to be assured that their concerns are addressed.
I think they're all reasonable and not indicative of cancel or stopping the project. I don't see anything in there that say we don't allow this, we won't allow this, or anything like that. He's just asking. And if you know Michael, he likes the Zoom meetings. So we pull it up, we get to zoom up, we get to look at all the things, we get to zoom out. And so it's kind of a nice way to do it. I haven't been used to that until this past COVID. Getting better at it, but still kind of like meeting in person.
So just a little math for our discussion up here. So right now they're at 48.9, if I got that correct, lot coverage.
That's correct.
If the lot were the same size as the standard lot in that area, 60 by 120 versus 60 by 105, they'd only be at 42.7. And given that they have some pervious pavers, you could argue that their lot coverage would increase to 37. So just for context, it's 5% over, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Less than you might see. I mean, just for perspective sake.
No, the comment I were going to make was just kind of, and we've said this before, is that, when it comes to the village and the residents there, they predate any kind of zoning. And so the fact that our current zoning has the 35% lot coverage ratio in it is, I don't want to call it arbitrary, but it was applied to a situation that pre-existed. And we're well aware that there's multiple residences and structures within the neighborhood that exceed it. One issue that always does cause me concern is drainage, in the village. It's a known issue. And when it comes to, and Mr. Badger might be a good person to ask this question, because I've always wanted to ask it of an engineer. So if you're doing a kind of blanket review of stormwater requirements, needs, demands for an area, does an engineer kind of rely on this kind of whatever the lot coverage ratio is for whatever the area that they're looking at? Is that factor back into the drainage piece?
When we go, and I think I dropped a drainage calculation off, but absolutely, when you calculate, you have to look at permeability of each item. And when we look at pavement or roof, we give it a 90 to 95% permeability, meaning that it's going to run off, not go into it. And then all the way down to like heavy grass is 0.35. If you had sand and it was 20 to 30 feet deep, you might get to 0.1 and it was flat. It also takes into account slope. Something that's heavily sloped is going to run off faster. But in terms of what we did is we actually looked at what the soil could handle and then worked backwards. But in our calculations, everything's broken up by area.
And my question is more just if you were doing like the entire
I got you.
neighborhood, like several blocks at a time.
Yes, we do that when it's original. We will do a maximum lot coverage, and then we won't exceed that with any of the lots we design. So that is kind of typical. It's a little hard, kind of the way you've explained it. When you have something that's grandfathered, you might have one that has a 50% lot coverage. You might have one that has a 90% lot coverage. So do you average those, or do it's a very varied thing on a lot of the older towns we had, especially when they had 1/8 of an acre lots. You might have 30-foot wide lots, especially downtown. We do a lot of work downtown Indianapolis, and there's 30 and 35-foot lots.
So I guess, and where I'm going after is that our lot coverage ratio it both affects, I'm not going to use the term density because that always goes off the rail, but just the mass and the scale of the homes being built. Currently, the village doesn't have any kind of historic overlay. And so when you start applying lot coverage of 35% and the allowable heights is where we've been seeing people be concerned that we're ending up with streetscapes that don't have great continuity. The newer houses are oversized compared to the older houses, blah, blah, blah. And there's not much we can do about that. We can rely on the 35% lot coverage, but we are kind of limited as to what we can and can't do. But the other side of it is, and this is what I think is the more important piece, and the piece that I wanted to more focus on is the drainage issue. And why I'm very supportive of this project is that this resident has come, even though they are exceeding the lot coverage ratio, they're also providing an offset in terms of going above and beyond to provide on-site retention for it. I understand that within our staff and how we review these, we don't really have the capacity and we don't have any kind of hard and fast rules about how we look at that, how we accept it, deny it, whatever. All we can do is rely on the fact that they've hired a licensed engineer to put something together and they've said this will work. Hence the reason the lot coverage ratio of being up at around 49% doesn't really cause me any concern. Two items that do cause me concern is one, if we go forward with something like this, I'd like to make sure there's some sort of statement regarding ongoing maintenance of this piece. The second issue is one of the window well structure. Basically on the, let's call the north side of the house is a window well structure that basically sits out into the 5-foot setback line. I know I've talked to staff before about it. It's something typically the staff doesn't consider a infringement on it. I do. It is a structural component that basically allows the lower levels to be considered habitable. And unlike a air conditioner or a fence or even a set of steps coming off a porch, it's not removable. And that the removing of it basically affects the structure of the basement of the house. And one of the reasons I would say no to this project is because of that. And it's cropped up on other projects. So far, I know staff has been unwilling to kind of get involved in saying no to it. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but that's kind of my concern.
don't drive by my house. One thing I found interesting that Mr. Badger had to say was, we look at this lot coverage as if every lot is flat, essentially. Because what he just said is when you add slope, you get more runoff, flatter, less runoff. And so therefore that whatever percent, 35% threshold really only is effective in calculating something if every lot is flat. The minute people start to slope their lot or flatten their lot out, it actually changes the drainage calculations for the entire system, probably more so than adding 5% more lot coverage does. So that's kind of interesting.
I have issues with the fact that this is really, it differs from what you've described with the 35% coverage in the village, given the way the village has grown over time, in that this is a new construction. So this is a decision that was made about a lot, which is an unusual size and shape, to build this house along with the pool and the amenities that are being described. And I see this as a little bit of a foreseeable hurdle that, having done the diligence, the purchaser would realize that there are, rules in place that would make that requirement that you would have to get approval before. If that didn't impact your planning, at a minimum, it should have caused you a moment to think about, am I going to be able to get this approval to build this house and this pool on this lot? And to sort of say, well, I didn't create the lot, I just want to build a house on it. Well, that's true, but there are probably other lots which would easily allow the building of a house and a pool without running up against this brick wall, or maybe just a hurdle regarding the lot coverage. That for me is I see that as just perhaps not having done complete diligence prior to making the purchase of that lot.
If I could ask Mr. Jones, again, I'm not sure I quite understand the concern about the window well. You're talking about the window well, which would be for a basement window.
So, once again, the foundation wall, for all practical purposes, sits hard on the 5-foot setback line. And we've run across this before. If for some reason they wanted a bump out in the house and the foundation bumped out around to that and crossed that setback line, they'd either get a variance or have to move the house back, or et cetera. Now, we've also been confronted where people will run the foundation line straight, but then they have a projection on the house that oversteps that line. And we've once again, we've never addressed that, because basically, it's structurally, or the foundation is not across that setback, but the structure of the mass of the house, once again, to use that word, has crossed that line. My concern is with the window well piece is whether it's made out of concrete or corrugated steel or plastic or fiberglass or whatever, it is still functioning as a structural member of the house, in that its use is providing for and basically it's a life safety issue of providing a opening in a basement that an individual could climb out of in need. So, and secondly, it's an item that, unlike, like I said, with an air conditioner or a fence or other things we often find in those setback zones, it can't be removed. An air conditioner, nobody likes it, but you can remove your fence, you can take it down and put it back up, and it does not affect the ability of the residents to be inhabited. But a 5x5 hole in the side of the basement where dirt and water come in affects the ability of the house to be inhabited.
Okay.
Larry, can I make a comment? All of our, we talked about the foundation, and that is actually technically not part of the foundation. I know it appears to be part of the house, but so is a step. A step is part of the house, and we don't consider that an encroachment because it's not the foundation, nor do we consider the overhang of the house, which is actually part of the house, and into that 5-foot space. We don't consider that.
an encroachment either.
Well, if the foundation for the steps was poured as part of the basement foundation, it would not be allowed to cross that setback line. If it is a set of steps that go out just like a sidewalk or something that is not attached to the structure, I think there we allow it.
That's a means of ingress and egress, and that's the same thing that the window forms.
Except usually a house has multiple points of ingress and egress. This
just-
basement only has one way
By
out.
code, it has to if it's a bedroom,
Correct.
But only if it's a bedroom.
only if it's a bedroom. But again, it's a means of egress. I don't know if we want to argue a point that's like that. My issue is that we get in some places where your roofs are almost touching. And
Oh, yeah.
everybody's okay with it. And you're
Yeah,
like, no, it has to have
Yeah.
fire
It's-
coating, it has to have this, it has to have that. And there's a lot of these people that aren't doing that. We do that. And we understand that there's a fire code. We'll even, require that windows are non-operable and fireproof. So I'm very aware of this. This is a case that it's in a big setback on a side yard. And yeah, we're right on the property line, but it is a big setback to the street. There's about 10 or 12 feet. So I think it'd be ugly if it were right up next to it and your sidewalk was right next to it. But I don't see this as being anything more than steps or any other way of ingress or egress to the house.
Oh, I mean, if you show up these meetings, you'll see that I'm always off somewhere in a different little spot than
We engineers think differently.
the people in the, so I'm not.
All right. Are there any other questions for the petitioner's representative or for staff? Any further discussion among the board? If not, is there a motion? It's a long pause.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this. I move that docket number 2022-45-DSV, Development Standards Variance, in order to provide for an increase of lot coverage up to 48.9% for the construction of a single-family dwelling, in-ground swimming pool, and pool deck for the property located at 295 North 4th Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, be conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans, a commitment to address all of DPW's comments satisfactorily, and for the owner to have a plan in place for annual maintenance of the storm structure to ensure that it is clear, clean, and viable.
I got a question. But the staff report was not in support.
That is true, I guess. So the
So
finding of fact that findings in the staff report, we can exclude and the staff recommendations.
I'd second that.
Okay.
Do you have,
Thank you, Mr. Lake, and thank you, Mr. Jones. So the motion now is conditionally approved as presented and described based on submitted findings of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans, and a commitment to address all DPW issues satisfactorily.
Yep.
And agree to an annual maintenance on the drainage system to assure that it properly works at all times.
That's correct.
All right. All right, we have a motion with a second. Any further discussion among the rest of the board?
I'd just like to make one more point about the currently, like when I said earlier, I think within our staff and within our ordinance and everything else, we don't have any way to actually place any value on a resident who's offering up a on-site stormwater retention situation. It's just not available to us. So it's up to us to kind of use our experience and knowledge to kind of review and think about it. And that's hence the reason why I've been supportive of it, is that the ratio, the 35%, aids us in keeping a certain amount of mass and scale of similar homes in the area. But more importantly, and why I think it's more important, the drainage side of it is anybody can look out their door and maybe look down the street and say, well, I just don't like the look of that. That's arbitrary. But if we continue to allow lots to be built to a higher lot coverage ratio, eventually that water drainage issues ends up on somebody else's doorstep. And that person may or may not have cared what the house looked like or the size or what color was painted or anything else, but they will care about something that they have no way of controlling. And that's what the ratio allows us to control. And if we have residents who are willing to come up and offer their own fix to a system, I think we need to give that a certain amount of credence.
Yeah, and I would say that when this ordinance was written, sustainability wasn't as much of a consideration in residential design. Now to do anything, if you wanted to build a sustainable house, you would capture 100% of your water. I mean, that would be part of what you would do, likely to reuse it on your property for irrigation or gray water, but you would be capturing that. And so, I would encourage everybody to talk to town council about providing funds for our new zoning rewrite. And we might find things like sustainability and additional lot coverage in those zoning ordinances.
So, and I would just like to say that I absolutely cannot support the approval of this petition. We did receive also a letter from a remonstrant who is a neighbor of this property, who essentially asked us, why do we have these ordinances in place if in fact somebody can arrive, build a new construction that is blatantly outside of the stipulated limits. And this is, again, a new construction on a lot which is small for, it's atypically small. And I absolutely just cannot support this petition.
Well, thank you for the comments. Mrs. Postwaite, I agree. That was one of, if you hadn't asked, the one question I had was the buyer aware of the ordinance and what it allowed and what it did not? And I don't know that we got an answer on that. There was speculation by her representative that she had talked with someone, but due diligence would have allowed them to at least know that and gone into it with their eyes wide open. Having said that, I think Mr. Jones and Mr. Lake's comments about the building it so that we don't have the drainage issue is one that it would be nice to have our ordinances done in such a way that recognize solving that problem. So,
and I certainly too want to give credence to neighbors that do have those concerns. This neighbor is over 2 blocks away, so I don't know that I would call them a neighbor. If it was somebody next door and they were raising these concerns, I think it would give me more pause, certainly.
But people that live in the village do have the right to expect us to hold
Yeah.
people's feet to the fire with regard to what
Agree.
The ordinances are. Otherwise, it's chaos. Is my view. So
That's why we exist.
that's why we exist.
yeah, that is. All right. Having said all that, we have a motion that's been seconded to approve. There's a conditional recommendation for conditional approval of this petition. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Nay.
So we have 4 recommending approval, 1 recommending denial. The motion is approved. Best of luck with the project.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for all your comments.
I've read through the.
Next item on the agenda is docket number 2022-48-DSV.
We'll talk about this thing afterward.
I'm sorry. That was one that Mr. Andreoli was be representing. So the next one will be docket number 2022-49-DSV. P. Meyer, 3273 East 700 South. Petition for development standard variance to provide for an additional structure which exceeds the permitted accessory square footage, and 2, memorializes the allowable height for an existing accessory building being taller than the primary in the rural single family and 2-family residential zoning district R2. Yes, are you the Myers? All right. We would like for you to come forward, please. If you would state your name and address for the record, and then describe for us what you are requesting from this board.
Patrick Myers, 3273 East 700 South, Lebanon, Indiana. We are proposing an addition to our existing pole barn. The existing pole barn was built by the previous owners who filed for a variance of some sort, some nature. And we're looking for additional storage for personal belongings, vehicles, that sort of thing, that are currently stored outside.
All right. We have a fairly detailed report on this, both what you have provided to staff and then staff's report. If you'd like to describe it in any greater detail or provide any additional information, now is the time to do that.
Okay. Well, I am a bass fisherman. I fish a lot of tournaments, so most of the existing space is taken up by a boat and a tow vehicle. The other space is a work that I need space for is work related, work vehicle. And since I'm getting older, I've purchased a small utility tractor that we currently don't have storage for. So we're just looking to add on to the existing space that we have for those reasons.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner? Larry, I believe you and I may have, I'm not sure. I'm not sure when that earlier variance was done. You may have been involved in that. We're looking for a date here, but I don't see it quickly.
2016.
16? No, wouldn't have been me. Might have been you.
That'd be me.
Any questions for the petitioner? Seeing none, could we have a staff report, please?
Yes. The petitioners are stating they are wanting to do an addition to their pole barn. The pole, with that addition, the accessory square footage will be over the primary. Previously, the previous owners requested a petition to build a covered porch attached to the home, which also made the accessory square footage larger than the primary. So with any sort of increase in accessory structure requires going to the BZA as they are today. And then also with that request, the existing pole barn height is taller than the primary residence. The addition, however, will not be taller than the residence. It'll be fully compliant with the height restrictions. But since they were coming to the BZA, we wanted to go ahead and memorialize that height of the existing pole barn. This is a pretty common request in the surrounding areas. There is accessory over primary square footage as well as height. Pole barns taller than primary residences. And with that said, staff is in favor of both of the requests and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
This is a fairly sizable piece of property, isn't it? It's 4.5 acres roughly.
Correct.
Yeah.
4.45.
One other additional item, since the previous owners requested the variance for the porch addition, we added an additional 750 square feet to the home. So it's larger than it was prior, which obviously we went through the proper channels to do so.
Correct. Yep. Are there any remonstrators speak for or against this petition? Any online? Okay, all right. No questions for staff. Is there a motion that one would like to make?
So for variance 1, I move that docket number 2022-49-DSV Development Standards Variance to provide for the accessory square footage to exceed the primary up to 3,094 square feet at the property located at 3273 East 700 South, Lebanon, Indiana, 46052 in the rural single-family and two-family residential zoning district R-2 be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That variance carries.
Variance number 2, I move that docket number 2022-49-DSV, Development Standards Variance to provide for the memorialization of an accessory structure to exceed the height of the primary at the property located at 3273 East 700 South, Lebanon, Indiana, 46052 in the rural single-family and two-family residential zoning district R-2 be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, the submitted findings of fact, and substantial compliance with the submitted site plan.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Have best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item will be docket number 2022-51-DSV, D. Shoemaker. This is a petition for development standard variance to provide for two primary dwellings on one lot, two multi-story dwelling not meeting the 900 square foot on the first floor, and three memorializing the existing accessory building, which is a barn, which exceeds the height of the primary and exceeds the height of 35 feet as prescribed in the zoning ordinance in the rural single-family residential zoning district. Mr. Shoemaker?
I am Doug Shoemaker, 9195 East State Road 32. Our project is on 4.02 acres of land. And the existing structures, there's a 3-story historic farmhouse. It's 3,235 square feet. And then there's also an historic barn that's 2,995 square feet. And the historic barn is taller than the permitted 35 feet. The proposed construction, we're proposing a 2-story, 1,850 square foot garage with a living unit above. The first floor footprint of the proposed 2-story building is 935 square feet. It's primarily composed of the garage, but does contain 200 square feet of conditioned entry space. We really don't have anything additionally to add to what we've submitted. If you have questions, happy to answer them.
There's maybe just if you would mention what we have seen in the printed report, which is my understanding is that you will be using this as a living space while you either build or rebuild the existing farmhouse.
Yeah, the existing farmhouse is, as an historic structure, has absolutely no insulation, and the windows are single pane and the doors are very, very drafty. So what we're proposing is that we would move to this new structure and over the course of time, renovate the historic farmhouse.
And no intent of using that as a rental property or
No.
as space for a relative or anything else?
That's correct.
Eventually would just be a garage with some space above.
Maybe some chipmunks and some raccoons.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't think you'll want those. Yeah, I can bring some. if
Yeah.
you like.
We have a lot where we are too.
Are there any questions for the petitioner? Larry, you don't have anything to say about a guy that wants to build a 3-car garage and live above?
No, We went down the, what, barndominium line already. didn't we?
Right, yeah.
I would just like to congratulate you on being driven to restore this
Oh.
historic farmhouse.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on that. I'm sure it will have its satisfactions and also its frustrations, but congratulations on taking that on.
Same with the barn.
Same with the barn.
Yeah, the barn's an even bigger challenge.
But I noticed the pictures that you included that had the all of the brace work and so on inside. This looks, I mean, it was built in the early 1900s, correct?
It's wood dowel. Yep, with pin construction. It's beautiful.
Worth saving.
Yes.
Yeah, I echo Mrs. Postlewaite's comments. Thanks for doing that. Do we have any remonstrators for or against this project? Any online? Thank you. Could we have staff report, please?
Yes, so the petitioner is requesting two primaries on this residence. Essentially, what they're proposing above the living quarters above the garage is essentially, I would call it more like an accessory apartment, but in our ordinance, we would consider it a primary residence. With that, since it's above the garage, it doesn't have the 900 square feet on the ground floor. Again, I think that's probably more intent for a traditional type home. And then memorializing the existing height of the barn being taller than both the existing farmhouse and the proposed primary dwelling. And one other thing I'll add is, from what the petitioner has told us, it's not intended to be income generating. So staff would just recommend a commitment that it not be rented and just be intended to be used for family and that sort. With that said, staff is in favor of all three of those variance requests and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm looking at my own notes here, Mr. Shoemaker. I think I have an answer to this, but you'll have to install a septic system for this. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right.
It's separate from the existing.
Okay, and that's already been approved by the county health? Okay.
It has.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, is there a motion? There are 3 variances being requested.
I'd make the motion if I can get back to it, but somebody else wants to go ahead.
Right. I move the docket number 2022-51-DSV Development Standards Variance to provide for the allowed number of primaries use from 1 to 2, which includes a new primary dwelling at the property located at 9195 East State Road 32, Zionsville, in the rural single-family residential zoning district R1 be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That is approved. Are you up for variance 2?
I'll take it. I move the docket number 2022-51-DSV Development Standards Variance to provide for a multi-story dwelling not meeting 900 square feet on the first floor at the property located at 9195 East State Road 32, Zionsville, in the rural single-family residential zoning district R1 be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and substantial compliance with the submitted site plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion is approved. Variance
On a roll.
3.
I move that docket number 2022-51-DSV Development Standards Variance to provide for the memorialization of the height of the existing barn to exceed the height of the primaries and over the permitted 35 feet at the property located at 9195 East State Road 32, Zionsville, in the rural single-family residential zoning district R1, be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mrs. Postawait. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Best of luck with all of your work.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda is docket number 2022-52-UV. It is a petition for a use variance to provide for outdoor storage and sales in the rural general business zoning district at 6150 South 700 East in Zionsville. And if you would give us your name, you're the representative, is that
Yes.
correct? Your name and your address.
My name is Brian Sheward. I'm a civil engineer at Kimley Horton Associates. Nice to see you, Mike. The next, actually three, this one and the next two, I'd have a short presentation that you can see up there. And the assistant in the back is helping me out. I want to acknowledge that. Thank you. He's got it plugged in for me.
Okay, you're going to cover all three of
That's
the
okay.
requests.
If it pleases
That's
the board.
fine. We'll have to vote on them separately, but you can go ahead. Let me just mention now the second and the third will be 2022-55-UV. A second use variance to provide for outdoor storage and sales in the general business zoning district. And the third will be 2022-53-DSV, a petition for development standard variance to provide for a reduced number of loading berths in the rural general business district. These are all for High V located at 6150 South 700 East in Zionsville. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. And Kimley Horton Associates office is at 250 East 96th Street, Indianapolis, Indiana. With me tonight is Mr. John Brum from Hy-Vee. If there's any questions that I can't answer. To be clear, this is three separate variances. Well, two use variances and one design standard variance. And to make it very simple, actually, if you can slide down to the next slide down. Thank you. I think you're likely familiar with the site, but this is just east of Lowe's off of Whitestown Parkway, just north of the neighborhood, just south of the Whitestown Municipal Complex. And Get Go is there on the northeast corner on the other side of County Road 700. If you can scroll down for me. The site is rural GB zoning. If you can slide down one more. And I thought it'd be helpful. We obviously presented to the Plan Commission, but members of the board may not be as familiar. So you can see on the image above, north is up on this screen. The largest building on the development is the Hy-Vee grocery store or the food store on the south side. The docks, which is part of the variance that we're asking for, is on the southwest corner of the building, which is down on the lower left corner of the building. And with this development, at the same time that the grocery store is being built, the convenience store, fast and fresh convenience store gas station is located, will be built at the same time on the northeast corner, which is due west of where the Get Go is. There are four other outlots that there's no plans to develop at this time, but could be developed in the future. That front three along Whitestown Parkway and one on the east side of the site along County Road 700. And then the parking field just north of the building is to predominantly serve the grocery store. If you can go to the next slide. So the first use variance that we're seeking is for the food store. This is the 2022-52-UV request, and that's for outdoor seasonal storage and sales. So display basically of similar to what Lowe's is doing just to the west. So this time of year, the photos that were included in the staff report are from other Hy-Vee stores that show pumpkins. In the springtime, there could be flowers, things of that sort. And if you scroll down one more slide, we had included in the submittal where that would occur, which is along the face, or to get yourself oriented, north is to the left. Now it's the way our construction plans were prepared. On the west, plan west side, north side, true north, along the frontage would be where that outdoor seasonal sales would be. And then a box is indicated just on the northeast side or upper left corner of an outdoor parking area that could be used for outdoor display and sales there on the plan as well. If you scroll down again, the second request, which is a design standards variance, is for the food store, is the fact that in the rural GB zoning, the number of loading berths you need on a building is predicated on the square footage of the building. But Hy-Vee knows from their other stores that they do not need 11. They need 5 loading docks and 3, 1 for trash, 1 for compost, I believe, and 1 for recycling. So that totals 8. So essentially we're asking relief to have 3 less loading berths than what the Zionsville ordinance says. Justification is they have this store numerous places around the country and they don't need 11 in what they know that their product needs. So that puts us into a design standards variance request. And that's essentially as simple as that is. If you'd slide pull down, that's the location of where the loading berths are, which is on the lower left or lower right, which happens to be the southwest corner. Just at the bottom of the page would be Lowe's, so it's tucked in is the point on the back side of the building. If you go to the next slide. And lastly, the use variance 2022-55-UV is the same exact request, but it's for the C store for outdoor seasonal display. And that would occur between the fuel pumps and out in front of the C store, which is north facing. So it's the same request that we have for the food store. If you scroll to the next slide, that just identifies in the upper left, which is the northeast corner of the site, where that particular use variance is being requested for, which is the Fast and Fresh fuel station convenience store. Next slide. Staff, I'm sure they'll give you their staff report, but are recommending approval of these 3. And we are here to answer any questions if you have them. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Schuer.
So I have a question for you. The garden center, when you erect that temporarily, does that decrease your parking below the required parking?
It would, I believe, for a brief period of time. I think that would, I'm sure, decrease the parking at that time during that brief, I guess, moment when that occurs.
Okay.
To follow up on that, so you would probably display pumpkins in the fall and Christmas trees at Christmas time and flowers in the spring. And so it's all the time.
John, I don't know if you want to try to speak to that. I want to make sure I say the right thing. So.
Good evening, John Brown with Hy-Vee. The garden center area that's shown out in the parking lot typically goes up in March and comes back down again in June. It's roughly 20,000 square feet, takes up between 30 and 50 parking stalls typically. It's a normal use that we have. The way Hy-Vee is structured is each store can decide for themselves whether they want to have a garden center or not. So if we have a lot of customers at this store and parking is an issue, they'll probably opt not to do the garden center in the parking lot, and they would put seasonal flowers, plants, those kind of things on the front sidewalk of the store. The front sidewalk will have, you saw the photos, we have fall seasonal items up there. So spring, there's typically a lot of plants, fall, a lot of mums and pumpkins, summer, barbecue grills, possibly some patio furniture, sample sets that people can try out and then order, that kind of thing. And then winter, there might be some snow shovels out there, just bulk items that people really need and we don't have space to hold them all. It'd be things that fly off the shelf and wouldn't be out there very long, that kind of thing. So.
I know that Lowe's next door has storage buildings, and then during mulch season, they've got easily 30 spots going with mulch. So,
agreed. Yeah.
Any other questions for the petitioners? Thank you. Any remonstrators here for or against the requests? Any online? Could we have staff report, please?
Responding to both use variances at the same time. The petitioner seeks a use variance to permit outdoor storage of materials for sale and display in the rural general business zoning district. However, the zoning district does not permit these proposed outdoor storage uses. Staff notes the land use pattern of the Whitestown Parkway corridor, which supports a variety of land uses, functioning at a variety of intensities. In review of the proposed locations, which is near the buildings, and as the example seen in the petitioner's material and in Exhibit 4 of the staff report, staff finds the request consistent with operations of other similar uses and recommends approval of the petitions. Regarding the development standards variance, this 152,000 square foot building per the zoning ordinance requires this building to install 11 loading berths. The development plan approved on August 15th of this year by the Plan Commission included a total of 8 loading berths, 5 berths for the deliveries, 3 berths for trash and recycling collection. Exhibit 3 in the staff report should reflect this. Staff was supportive of the Plan Commission petition and as supportive of this variance petition, noting the site approval of the development plan and noting petitioners' historic experiences in operation and development of similar food stores throughout the Midwest. Staff recommends approval of this variance petition.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, is there anyone willing to start with the motion for the first variance?
Sure. I move that docket number 2022-52-UV, a use variance requesting the use of outdoor storage and sales in the areas depicted on the site plan submitted by the petitioner for the property addressed as approximately 6125 South 700 East, being in the rural general business zoning district GB, be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
No, it was either Pakel.
It was
or
Mr.
Pakel.
Pakel.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, I still think the two of you sound a lot alike if you're not looking that way.
I hope you're not including me in this.
Yeah, wait a minute. Who's Andy and I?
We'll leave that alone.
Yeah.
You're the easiest one to add into the bench. Thank you, Mr. Pakel. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion is approved.
All right, I move the docket number 2022-53-DSV, a development standards variance for the reduction of the required number of loading berths from 11 down to 8 as filed in docket number 2022-53-DSV Exhibit 4 for the property located at approximately 6125 South 700 East in the rural general business zoning district GB, be approved as presented and described based on the findings of fact, findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion is passed.
And lastly, I move that docket number 2022-55-UV, a use variance requesting the use of outdoor storage and sales in the areas depicted on the site plan submitted by the petitioner for the property addressed at approximately 6160 South 700 East, being in the rural general business zoning district GB, be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postlethwaite. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. good luck to Hy-Vee Group. So my wife is looking forward to having you there. The next item on the agenda is docket number 2022-54-DSV. Petition for development standard variance to provide for an increased number of signs per lot in the rural general business zoning district and within the rural Michigan Road overlay at 3091 South US 421. The shops, and this is with the Harris Family Limited Partnership. And Mr. Price, you are representing them. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Matt Price. Here tonight on behalf of Harris FLP. Have a brief PowerPoint, which Jonah, I think, was going to load for me to provide some orientation to the property. Go to the first slide. I think you're all familiar probably at this point with Appaloosa Crossing. It's at the southeast corner of County Road 300 and Michigan Road. Outlined in red on the in the presentation is what we call the shops lot. It's a little over 3.3 acre lot, which has an integrated center commercial retail building that is nearing a grand opening for several of the businesses located within the shops. Go to the next slide. This gives kind of a graphical presentation of the existing businesses that are getting ready to open up. The right-hand side of the site plan is the north end of the building. And then the south end of the building is the Verde restaurant, where the Plan Commission recently approved a development plan amendment to permit some outdoor patio space. The method for calculating the number of permitted signs in the rural GB district is a little bit of a mathematical exercise. The business is permitted by right one sign per lot per 200 feet of linear road. And so to calculate the number of permitted signs for this site, you first calculate the number of roads that front or adjoin the property. So in this case, on the west side, we have Michigan Road. On the east side, we have Appaloosa Drive. And on the south side, we have Trackner Way. That altogether is a little over 1,200 feet of adjoining roadway, which gives us 6 and a fraction signs. So if you round down, it gives us 6 permitted signs. The center itself is 23,000 square feet. And in order to provide adequate signage for these businesses, more than the number of signs permitted by right are necessary, even if you limit the number of signs to 1 per facade. And so what we've worked with staff to arrive at is a way of computing the number of permitted signs for this property in a way that really wasn't contemplated in the rural GB ordinance. And so to simplify the request a little bit, what it would permit is, as a general rule, is 1 sign per facade per business, with the exception that if you have at least 160 linear feet of frontage, you're allowed 2 signs per facade. That's to account for, in this case, the Uncle Bill's pet store, which occupies a significant portion of the center. This permits signage that's much like other retail centers in our jurisdiction as far as the number of permitted signs. It would still be limited by the square footage, meaning that the signs are still limited to 15% of the frontage area on each side. So there's a limitation not only in terms of the total number of signs, but also in terms of the area of those signs. Noted in the staff report that there is a recommendation for approval, and we wanted to, on behalf of the petitioner, wanted to express our thanks to staff for working with these ordinance provisions and with the proposal to come up with this formula for determining the number of signs that would be adequate. With that, I'd be available to answer any questions that you have and appreciate your favorable consideration this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Are there questions for the petitioner's representative? This would allow that if some of the larger space using tenants were to leave and one space became 3, you would have the ability to have a sign up for each of the tenant spaces.
Correct. 1 per facade. That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And there is a monument sign as well, which will have all of the tenants shown.
That's correct. We previously received, a staff report does a great job of articulating this. We previously received approval for the style of monument sign, but not its location. We anticipate that location will be in the southeast corner of the property. That is a step that also requires plan commission approval. So we'll be coming back in for a development plan approval to determine the appropriate location for that sign.
So I'm just wondering, some of these, for example, which are on, I'm looking here at, is it Classic Cleaners? It's at the end of that block. So when you say facade, you're talking about on the front, but also on the side of that building?
Front and back.
Front and back of the building?
Yeah, the parking area that you see in the bottom is the rear side of the building
Right.
that backs up against Appaloosa Drive. So it's actually received permits today for 1 sign in the front of the store and 1 sign on the rear of the building.
So there would be nothing, I'm assuming these are drive-throughs for the cleaners and whatever is going to be on the other side of that pass-through. So there would be no signage on that drive-through?
That's correct. It's not contemplated that we would have signs towards any internal drive, other than maybe directional signage that would be not a commercial message.
I just got a general question. I mean, typically whenever I get involved with signage with my buildings, it's based on the amount of facade of the building. Is there something unique about, I've just never heard of it based on lineal footage of road? Because I would think you'd consistently be short of signage.
Would. Yeah. I think it's an excellent point. And I think the staff report attempts to address this, is that it appears that the rural GB did not really contemplate an integrated center, and rather was thinking more in terms of a single user that would have maybe 1 sign, like a Hy-Vee, that would have 1 or limited number of signs, as opposed to a use that has multiple businesses occupying the same building.
So if this was a single tenant building, they'd be allowed 6 signs.
Correct.
And they can say the same thing 6 different times. But the problem is with a kind of a strip type center. Yeah, okay.
That's right. That's
We
right.
had
That's
that issue with Corteva. We were trying to do a sign for them, and 1,600 foot of right of way on 465, we could only get 1 sign because of their ordinance.
Okay.
Any other questions? Are any remonstrators here for or against this project? None online? Our IT guys wrapped up there with your.
He's good.
Okay. Could we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mr. Price is certainly correct in that this calculation can be complex. And I certainly agree with his viewpoint on how the rural ordinance reads. Simplification of this variance request is for the approval of additional signage for a proposed tenant bay. In the strictest sense, the ordinance directs us to calculate available signage by road frontage. This calculation would allow for 6 signs. Presently, the site has 5 tenants who require signage. And when we include the monument sign, we find that that 6th tenant bay does not have approval to apply for signage. Noting again that this building has 3 facades, staff is in support of the petitioner's request to increase the number of size based on the number of tenants, not road frontage, and that each tenant be allowed 2 wall signs, only 1 per facade, and that any tenant with 160 linear feet or more of store frontage be allowed up to 4 signs with a maximum of 2 wall signs per facade, and that any tenant occupying a space of 3 facades be allowed 3 signs with 1 per facade. Staff is in support of this petition.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Hearing none. Is there a motion?
I move the docket number 2022-54-DSV, development standards variance to permit an increase in the number of permitted wall or other permitted type signs for the multi-tenant retail building located on the shops lot of Appaloosa Crossing, plus a single multi-tenant monument sign also to be located on the shops lot addressed as 3091 South US Highway 421, being in the Rural General Business Zoning District, GBB, approved as presented and described based on findings in the staff report and the staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's approved. Best of luck. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll now go back in time to petition 2022-48-DSV. This is a petition for development standard variance to continue to allow for a second accessory building to permanently exist without a primary structure in the rural single-family and 2-family residential zoning district R2. This was originally approved in 2017 as the docket number 2017-29-DSV, which expired September 12th, 2022. And this is for the Gamirs at 7100 South State Road 267 in Lebanon, Indiana. Mr. Andreoli, you're
Thank you,
representing them.
Mr. President. Thank you for accommodating my schedule tonight and putting me last on your agenda tonight. That certainly helped me being able to get down here and have my meetings up in Lebanon. Mike Andreoli, 1393 West Oak Street. I'm here representing Mr. and Mrs. Gamir, who are with us tonight. As you'll recall, Mr. Gamir in particular is a collector of World War II memorabilia. He needed a place to store some of his equipment inside, not outside, but inside. And the building was erected, and then a smaller, with permission, a smaller building was erected out there to hold additional equipment. That was approved unanimously by the Board of Zoning Appeals some 5 years ago, but it had a 5-year sunset provision with it. So essentially, this is a de novo petition. It is not to be an amended petition. It's a de novo petition, and you're to consider it as such tonight. We know of no violations, no problems, no difficulties. Mr. Gamir has not added additional buildings or used it in any manner inconsistent with the commitments that were made or the approvals that were given. He's planted additional trees out there, and he's maintained the property very well. It's essentially next to a cemetery out there. Those of you who have gone by it probably have seen the two not very large outbuildings out there. One's much larger, and that is primarily stores some of the trucks and some of the other things he has, but nothing is at any point is stored outside. Everything is within that period. I would respectfully request that if the board sees fit, and it's within your province, of course, that you not do another sunset provision, but just give him approval to do that. It's still subject to the commitments and how it's going to be utilized in your approval, and the fact that nothing else can be built out there. But we would respectfully ask you to consider that. This really isn't a money-making venture for for the Gamirs as such, is it's not a business that they're operating there, just utilizing it for storage. So having to come back before the board and file fees every 5 years is a little bit of a financial burden and imposition for them. However, notwithstanding that, that's within your province, and we'll be happy to do that if you feel it's necessary after taking any public input. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Andreoli. Any questions for the petitioner's representative? Is this, I do have a question. And you asked about approving this without a sunset clause. And I drove by it 5 years ago because I was part of this group then. Is there any likelihood that, beyond the Gamir's use as it is today, that there would ever be a primary residence?
It very well could be. I know his son has delved in that a little bit, but what do you think, Bob? Do you think it?
Floodplain. I don't know if anybody can build it.
No, essentially, I think the only way that property would ever transition is fairly small property, and is that bordered by the cemetery, and then the property to immediately south west is elevated over this particular property. So unless I just can't think of envision a situation where somebody's going to come in and actually make it usable. We wish that they would. And perhaps at some point it might transition out if anything's done in Fayette from any development progress that may be made there. It might transition out in that way. But otherwise, we anticipate it's going to be utilized in this manner.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a question. Is there a security? I'm wondering how you ensure that you don't have any problems with break-ins or anything, given that you don't have a residence there.
Bob, you have to come up.
Mr. Gamiri, if you would go to the microphone so we can capture it for the minutes,
I'm
please.
gathering that you haven't had a problem. I'm wondering if you have a security system. Yeah. Not good.
Robert Gamir, I go by Paul. So if you call me Robert, I won't respond. Anyway, that small structure to the front looks like a house. It's one of these Amish built, well, it's a shed with a porch on it, it's what it is. So we're hoping that's a deterrent. There are no windows in the pole barn, so there's no way for any access there. There's dawn to dusk lights, dawn to dusk, dusk to dawn. Well, anyway, there's a light that comes on at night on the front, the back of the pole barn. There's just a farm field behind us, a neighbor to the south of us, the cemetery to the north of us, which has never been a problem, and the road. So if anybody were to get in there, I don't know what they would steal, because there's nothing in there but Army trucks, Army trailers, and junk. In the small structure to the front, there's nothing in there but junk. Our kids and our grandkids, things that they don't have a place to put. So overall, if the whole thing would blow away, the net damage might be a nickel.
Paul, I think I mentioned to you, don't say junk to the Board of Zoning Appeals. That is a word that they do not like to hear, so I would caution you. Not saying-
As long as it's
The term-
indoors.
Let's say
The
right
term is
now,
collectibles.
collectibles. I like that
There
term.
you
Yes,
go.
they're collectibles, all right. And there's not much way anybody could build out there. Like say, we had to elevate the ground where the pole barn was put to get it out of the floodplain so we could get permission to build the original pole barn. Fortunately, the little, we call it the little barn up front, is on a slab, elevated slab from whatever industry used to be out there. So other than that, I don't know where anybody would build anything out there. You sure could put a septic system in.
Thank you, Mr. Gamir. Any other questions? We have any remonstrators for or against the project?
Oh, I saw this go ask.
And online? Thank you. Could we have staff report, please?
Yes, I think Mr. Andreoli did a good job summarizing, but previously you heard this petition in 2017 to allow for the second accessory structure, which has the sunset expired last month. And previous to that, there was a BZA approval from the Boone County to allow the pole barn that's there as well. Staff has not had any complaints or issues received from the public. And with that said, staff would be favorable of approving the request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, what is staff's position on an additional sunset in 5 years?
We kind of left that open to you all. I mean, based on not receiving any complaints in the past 5 years, I wouldn't see a major need for a sunset to continue.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is typically one of the reasons for a sunset is to make sure that it's something that we really shouldn't have done. So that it sounds like we haven't had that. No, we have complaints. So any further discussion among the board? Hearing none, is there a motion on this docket item?
I move that docket number 2022-48-DSV Development Standards Variance to continue to allow for a second accessory building to permanently exist without a primary structure at the property located at 7100 South State Road 267, Lebanon, Indiana, 46052 in the rural single and two-family residential zoning district R2 be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, in substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fackel. You got it right, didn't I?
You did.
That's because I could see you talking. We have a motion with a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Good luck with your collectibles, Mr. Clear. You got a deuce and a half?
Got a deuce and a half, 5-ton tractor, 5-ton dump truck.
Oh, boy. I can see your wife's into it as well, huh?
Well, she's in the Model A's, which are also out there. That's why we ran out of room.
I guess it's important to make an appointment before, to be sure that we.
Well, yes, we're very frequently out there. But anybody's welcome. They want the truck to drive.
Yeah, I think I've spent my time driving a deuce and a half. I'll let somebody else take care of that.
Amen. It's nostalgia. Come out.
It could be, yeah. All right. The next item on the agenda is docket number 2022-50-DSV. Marsh Meadows, petition for development standard variance to exceed the 3-to-1 lot width to depth ratio for lots 3, 4, and 7 in a major subdivision in the rural single-family residential zone district R1. This is at 7798 East, 500 South, Lebanon, Indiana. Mr. Andreoli?
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, Mike Andreoli, 1393 West Oak Street. I'm here representing Stonegate Farms. With me tonight is Brian Cheward from Kimley Horn, who's doing the civil engineering work on this particular platted development. John and Cheryl Weaver own Stonegate Farms, which is a horse farm that they have in the immediate area. They apologize for not being here tonight. They just returned from Southwest Florida. And this is really the only home they have right now because the one down there didn't fare too well. So they would beg off tonight and weren't particularly interested in coming tonight. So they do apologize for that. We are seeking a variance from development standards for 3 of the lots. This is kind of an unusual project because most of the projects that come in front of you generally develop, especially on the single family residential end, to the maximum density that's permitted. This is This is essentially an exception to that. This is only an 8-lot subdivision, and the Weavers have farms. Their farm has horse stalls and all of that in the immediate area. They're just really not interested in having a dense development in their general area. The original amount of the property is 60 plus acres. Originally, this consisted of property on both sides of Zionsville Whitestown Road. And on the actual plat that you'll see a block A. That's the remaining acreage. The actual acreage that we're seeking to develop for the 8 lots is about 39 acres, and that's on the north side and borders County Road 800 to its immediate east, and access will be off of that particular road. In laying it out, the Weavers have a particular affinity for landscaping, ponds and those types of things, and wanted to create a development where if each lot wasn't directly on some type of pond or wet retention, it was visible to each lot and to each homeowner. And so the way this was laid out subjected these large lots, at least 3 in particular, to have slight variations from the 3-to-1 lot ratio. So that's essentially what the variance is in order to allow these 3 of the lots as designated in our narrative to seek a variance for the 3-to-1 lot ratio for those. Be happy to answer any questions that you have with regard to the layout. We did work with staff on this. Staff has made a favorable recommendation with regard to this. We are scheduled in front of the Plan Commission coming up in October for this primary plat to discuss that further. But in terms of the variance, we did want to try to stick with 8 lots if we could. And this was the best layout and design that we had, given the number of lakes and landscaping that we're going to put on this property. So that you know, even though it's not reflected in front of you tonight in terms of variance, we are going to have perimeter sidewalks, a heavy landscape plan that will be submitted and reviewed in front of the Plan Commission. So in their prior lives, both Weavers owned a landscaping business in Chicago. So they have a real affinity for trees and landscaping and how this is going to look. They want to create a truly custom and one-off development out there. And limitation of number of lots is the first step in that. So be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Andreoli. Any questions for the petitioner's representative?
I'm just assuming the placement of the lakes and some of the easements for the waterway is kind of based on the existing topography, and that's kind of where the flow already goes through.
There's in the northwest corner, there seems to be some low areas back there, and that's where a lot of the water flows. And we've got a drainage plan that's actually gonna pick up the water there. And I think we've probably well oversized the ponds in terms of what is absolutely necessary out there from a drainage standpoint. But again, there's an aesthetic value to this that we wanted to meet as well. But the drainage will actually go under County Road 800 and into the ponds across the street at the subdivision, which the calculations were designed to pick up this area when that was developed and approved. So we're working on all of that, and we'll work through that with the Plan Commission and in the development plan as we move forward. But first step is to try to make sure that the lot layout as we have it from a variance standpoint will meet your approval. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I think it's also good to see lots laid out with adequate spacing between the well and the septic field. And even the septic field appears to be the appropriate amount of size for given size of residences.
Anyone here wish to speak for or against this project? Anyone online? Thank you. We have the staff report, please.
As Mr. Andreoli stated, this is a major subdivision for 8 lots. It'll proceed on to go to the Plan Commission for a primary plat and development plan. 3 of the 8 lots do not meet the 3-to-1 width to depth ratio. I will note that these lots are the larger lots of the 8 and follows the low density in the area. Is that the lots could be denser, as Mr. Andreoli explained. With that said, staff is in favor of the variance request, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Sure. I move the docket 2022-50-DSV development standard variance to provide for the proposed 3 lots to exceed the 3-to-1 lot width depth ratio for the property located at 7798 East 500 South estimated Lebanon in the rural single-family residential zoning district R1 be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report, the staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's approved. Best of luck. That brings us to the end of the petition items. There are a couple other matters to cover. Let's first look, that you should have received in your packet a listing of BZA meetings for 2023. It was suggested at the September meeting that we consider a different date for the April meeting, the April 5th meeting, because of the Zionsville spring break. We can, if the board so desires, change that. The recommended date would be April 12th. So I would suggest we have a discussion on that now, and then if we wish to change, we would need a motion to change it and board approval.
So I may be the only one that has a spring break issue, but I know that last year we had items continued, which caused a big backup because either petitioners couldn't be present or demonstrators couldn't be present. And so I just threw that out last time as a concern. Do we want to create that same problem or do we want to try and avoid it? And I don't care either way. It was merely a suggestion.
You will not be here in town during that period?
Likely not.
I will likely not be here either.
I'm fine with making the change. I expect I will be here both of those weeks, but I'm fine with making, if that accommodates those who are traveling with.
Yeah, we have 2 absent. The 3 of us have to be here.
Right.
Can't be sick, can't be out of town.
Right.
And I
don't have a problem moving it.
neither do I. It doesn't matter to me.
Or just
Hearing
to-
that, it sounds as though we would be amenable to
To
that.
clarify, I think you said the 12th, it will be Tuesday, April 11th if you meet it, if you move it, not the 12th.
Oh, what's the 12th? Is that?
I think the Parks Board has a meeting that next Wednesday, so it would have to be that Tuesday,
So it would be,
Tuesday, April 11th.
I was saying 12th,
Mhm.
thinking it was a Monday.
Yeah.
But Tuesday is the 11th?
It's
So it was
Tuesday,
really the
yeah.
10th?
And I think on the 10th
Yeah,
is when town council would move their meeting too. Because I think they usually move their meeting a week after as well.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, Tuesday would be the only option.
So the 12th was the wrong date to begin with.
Yeah, so the 5th was a Wednesday to begin with. The 12th would be a Wednesday.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Yeah, plan commissions are Monday nights. So yeah, it would be going back a day to the 11th.
So it would be Tuesday, April the 11th.
Yeah.
Is everyone still all right with that?
I think I'm Still all right with that?
All right, then if we could have a motion to move the April 5th BZA meeting, April 5th, 2023 to April the 11th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Thank you, Mrs. Postawait. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So staff, if you would please make sure that the calendars show that as April the 11th. The second item, and Janice, I'll ask you to kind of give us a briefing on this. And this will be for information as well as a means of testing for the feeling of the BZA members on this item before it would go to the Plan Commission.
Thank you. Staff would like to share with you that on October 17th this year, at the Plan Commission meeting, staff will request approval to remove the BZA and Plan Commission rules of procedure and the fee schedule from the zoning ordinance. The fourth ordinance amendment request is to provide language revision to section 193.035 of the subdivision control ordinance to reference the yearly approved schedule of filing deadlines and meeting dates. The unintended inclusion of the rules residing within the zoning ordinance is that it transitioned the document from a rule to a law. This is not the intent of the Indiana Code statutes. If approved, these actions would allow for the documents to reside as a standalone document, which is typically how these documents will be found in other municipalities. Please note, no text changes are being requested. And again, this is something that will be discussed at the next Plan Commission meeting. During that interim that we have lost a director and found a director, we were lucky enough to have a consultant to Plan Commission and BZA functions. That is Kevin Buckheit. I'd like to introduce you to Kevin. Thank him for his service. He has truly been a wonderful support to the department in this period of time. Kevin, I don't know if you have some comments you'd like to offer on these ordinance amendments.
I think you've covered most of it. For the record, my name is Kevin Buckheit, and I am a planner, just like the good people you have helping you out here tonight. I work for the law firm Krieg DeVault in our offices in Carmel. About half my career is spent sitting in their chairs, so I know I'm very intimately familiar with the Herculean efforts that they put forward to keep things moving in the right way. Janice covered a lot of this, and I can be available for any questions you may have. The only aspect of the ordinance amendments that will affect the board will be the extraction of your rules of procedure. The statutes intend that the rules of procedure are yours and yours alone. And somewhere in time, they were amended into the ordinance and they effectively became law, and you ceased to have rules in a technical legal nature. So we're trying to correct that and get the rules back into your hands for further development of them and management of them over time. I think I'll let it go at that and answer any questions you may have.
Operationally, we really would see no change in terms of procedures at meetings, et cetera. This change would not affect that.
No, it realigns the board with the intention of the statutes that you are managing your own rules. The thing that will come up later as the ordinance that Janice mentioned comes to an effective date for that ordinance to extract the rules is you'll be asked to readopt your set of rules that you've been operating under, just to start a new timeline on that establishment as your document. And the effective date on that of your action to readopt the rules will be made to coincide with the effective date of the ordinance that will extract the rules from the ordinance.
So is it fair to say that extracting them from the ordinance and allowing them to be a standalone document would make them easier for us to modify if we must, or if we
Yes, ma'am.
need to?
Yes, ma'am. And as you did tonight, suspending the rules over the form of notice that was put out by mail, those sorts of things. If somebody comes within 1 day of a publication for the public hearing, and I'm just guessing here, maybe you require 21 days, they got it out in 20 days. State law requires at least 10 days. 20 days is still in line with the state minimum requirement. And if they've accommodated posting the sign and the mail on time, that would be something reasonable that you can consider a suspension of the rules for.
Any other questions for Kevin? Again, I think part of this was to get, two of you will be at the Plan Commission meeting, listening and voting on this. From the other three, I guess I would see this as, I'd support it and see it as a positive move.
I agree. It sounds to me like it's sort of hygiene, if you will, sort of cleaning up something.
Well, housekeeping.
Housekeeping, thank you. That's better. That's a better word, I think. Sorry.
Andy, thoughts?
No, I'm good with this. Thank you. When did this actually happen?
We're probably not going to tell you to preserve the integrity of the folks who may have been in here at the time. It happened. It was something that happened. And my guess is the rules probably got caught up in a larger package of amendments to the online code that American Legal hosts for the town, and they just codified them.
Okay. I guess I'll accept that.
It might even be a little bit farther back than that. We'd have to uncover that.
Yeah.
So you don't actually know.
Yeah, no, we can fix this. That's what we need to know.
Okay.
Any other questions for Kevin? Hearing none, I think we are finished with our business. A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Jones got that one.
I got that one.
Kel was silent.
Ready to get out of here.
Postaway was silent. Seconded.
I'll second.
I don't think yours is a second. Mr. Lake. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
This is something.